we come to the next talk. It's CERT.at's daily business in a nutshell, and I'm looking forward to the talk.
Okay, so good afternoon to everyone. So, as he already said, we're from CERT.at. What does it stand for? It's for Computer Emergency Response Team of Austria. So we're actually the national CERT of Austria, as well as the government CERT of Austria. So what we are talking about today is something usually CERTs don't talk about. They like to keep it secrecy. So this is actually what we are doing on a daily basis, which with all the tools we are using. So it's a deep insight into our daily business, into our daily work. My name is Christian Wollner, and this is my colleague, actually one of our handlers, the youngest handler. And I will give the mic to him, because he will start with the first part, and I will continue with the second one.
Okay. Hi, everyone. A word of warning before I dive into the topic. This is the first presentation I've ever given in English, and in addition to that, the first presentation I've ever given in front of an audience bigger than 5 to 10 people. So if I stutter too much or if I get too fast, please just let me know so I can slow down and help you enjoy the presentation. So our daily business can be split up in sort of 6 smaller working groups. We do incident handling, the most traditional topic. We perform tech watch. That means we are looking what's out there, what's going on, generally what's going on in the security world. We write warnings about serious and severe security vulnerabilities and new developments when it comes to exploits. We maintain a sort of a company blog. We maintain different mailing lists for different audiences. And last but not least, we have a daily end of shift report which summarizes the events of the day. I'll start to go into more details about TechWatch first. To be able to react to upcoming threats and to deal with incidents properly, we need to know what's going on out there. To accomplish that task, we watch a lot of sources. This graph is just a minority of them. We have really a wide variety. We are watching the usual news pages, we're watching personal blogs, we watch the newsletters of vendors. As you can see in the next slide, it's really, really, really much. On an average day, there are about 200 to 300 news articles, let's categorize in that way, that we have to read through and sort of classify in order to get the severity out of them. We couldn't do this by hand. This would simply not be possible. Because of that, we are using a tool which was developed by the National Cybersecurity Center of Holland, the NCACNL. They self-describe it as sort of a newsfeed reader on steroid. It's highly efficient and you can do a lot of things with it. We basically use about 1/5 of its capability, and we use it at the same time as a database for the end of shift report, which I will talk about a bit later. I can't stress enough how problematic our daily job would be if we hadn't a tool like that. It's not open source, sadly, but if you're in incident response, please get in contact with NCSC if you need a tool like that. They are happy to share information about it. If we come across a vulnerability or a development in the security industry that's really severe in its impact on Austrian national or governmental infrastructure, we write a warning about it. What a warning is, basically, is a write-up about the vulnerability, about the impact of the vulnerability, and possible ways to mitigate it. We have relatively unclear criteria. Unclear doesn't mean we don't know when to write warning. Unclear means even if something is not obviously dangerous, we think twice about it to make sure we don't miss any dangers to our constituency. Roughly, it can be described as Does the vulnerability have a national relevance in sort of, for example, a remote code execution in the core components of WordPress is a lot more severe than, oh, we have a remote code execution in a self-written CMS 10 people over the world use. Another criteria is that there are mostly no updates so far. So for example, the best example for that is Microsoft Patch Day, which often consists of patches for 0 days in Internet Explorer, remote code executions, which would generally be very severe and could be considered worthy of a warning, but since there are already patches in place and the patches are mostly applied in bigger companies by patch management, we don't classify it as severe and mainly don't write a warning. Then we have the implications and the consequences of it. The implications are, okay, what can an adversary and attacker do with that, and what impact would it have if a company gets attacked by that? We are not aiming at being the fastest, because there are news companies out there are dedicated security companies out there who have tens and hundreds of employees who scan the internet for that daily. So we probably aren't the fastest out there, but we're trying to be the most the most qualified in the sense of we'd rather like to deliver quality instead of quantity. We have a very strict 4I principle. That means even if I or one of my colleagues writes a warning, and even if it's very urgent, it doesn't get sent out before a colleague or my boss has checked it. We write the warnings in German, because 90% of our constituency are solely German speaking. So we are happy to use our resources, but it's sadly only in German. After we write a warning, it gets published on our website, it gets published on our Twitter account automatically, and it also gets published on a special mailing list we maintain solely for that purpose. I will go on that a bit later. What's also important is that we don't just fire and forget our warnings, we update them as events unfold. So for example, if there's a critical 0-day vulnerability and a patch comes up, then we'll update the warning stating, if you want to be secure, just apply that patch. Sometimes there are events that aren't as severe as to be qualifying for a warning, but are interesting in some way or the other. That's what we have our company blog for. The difference to our warnings is that in the company blog you find personal opinions of employees, not speaking as CERT AT as a whole. Because of that, it's not just in German, it's also in English, and contains, for example, maintenance information, awareness suggestions. Another difference is that we don't have a strict 4I principle here, but we generally try to keep our blog posts relatively high when it comes to quality. Yeah, I've mentioned it briefly before. We as National Computer Emergency Response Team maintain several mailing lists. We have non-interactive mailing lists, as I mentioned, our warning list, which basically just, if you subscribe there, you get an email for every warning we send out. We have the daily list, which contains our daily end-of-shift reports of the most important events in security of that day. I'll talk about that a bit later. And we have 2 interactive mailing lists. For one is our discuss list, which is a closed private list for security professionals in Austria, giving them a private forum to chat about sensitive topics you wouldn't otherwise discuss or disclose on a public mailing list. If anybody in here wants to join that list, please just come to our booth afterwards. We're more than happy to help you out. Last but not least, we also maintain some governmental lists, but since that's not part of the talk, I won't go into more details here. Our office hours are from 8 a.m. until 6 in the evening, and that's exactly the same period where everything we collect in the Taranis I've mentioned before, every event we consider noteworthy falls into the end of shift report. It's consisting of today's most relevant news, which is a bit of a misleading title since it's basically the last 24 hours. we're putting news abstracts in there. That means it could be anything from your local newspaper reporting about a data breach that could have wider implications, but it could also be Bruce Schneier or Krebs on security. So it's a wide variety of topics, and thus it's also not just in German, but also in English. Again, we have our 4I principle here. As you can see on the left side, you have the handler of the day, which in that example case was me, and the co-handler who co-authored this and corrected this before it gets sent out was a colleague of mine. The outreach is very similar to our warnings. We have a mailing list, a daily mailing list, which is dedicated to those end-of-shift reports. There's an archive you can check out on our webpage, which has, I think, the last 6 months of end-of-shift reports. And of course, it gets automatically published on Twitter, and you can set up an RSS feed to be notified every day. Now I'm going to talk about the most traditional task a CERT has to do, the classical incident handling. That's something we'd really like to stress out, because many companies receive a lot of emails every day from us informing them about security vulnerabilities or problems. We eyeball each and every outgoing message. There are no automatisms here. That's not just because we are trying to create more work for us, but it's mainly because we can't, due to the amount of sources we have, we can't really automatically make sure that everything works and that everything is correct. So we are basically forced to interact here. The core part of our incident response is our ticketing system. We use Request Tracker for incident response, copyright by Press Practical Solutions. Basically, a whole incident consists of 3 major components: incident reports, the incident itself, after we verified the report, then we say, yes, it's an incident, and the investigation in it. It's perfectly fine for custom incident reports we receive, for example, from private persons. But for the higher quantity incidents, for example, data we receive from independent researchers, there are further modifications needed. To address the amount of data we get, just a quick note up, we have the aforementioned custom incidents, for example, phishing notifications about banks that cooperate with us. We have targeted attacks that we get informed about by companies, and we have researchers that come to us to manage responsible disclosure for them. As well as the IP address and domain URL-based feeds. These are bigger information feeds like shadow server, Google malicious sites, and so on. In addition to that, we also maintain some internal sources that are collected from ourselves. My colleague will tell you a bit more about that. But you can basically imagine it as data that gets pre-prepared before it gets to become an actual incident. To make it easier to explain, we split it up in the manually and semi-automated parts. The manual part was, as I explained, the custom incidents we get and we have to handle for ourselves. We don't have templates for that. We don't really have a standard procedure for that. So that's one of the things where most of our time and effort goes in, just basically putting a handler on the problem and solving it for our constituency. That's handled directly within and from our ticketing system. And I'm now going to talk about our semi-automated. Again, semi-automated, we don't have full automatisms. And the first thing is the IP address based, which is mostly clients. Clients ++ are NTP, Heartbleed, OpenResolver, and Windows Proxy. These are handled by some custom-made scripts we have. Sorry, I totally forgot to mention. We get malware feeds from Microsoft and some other sources, basically from sinkholes, so we can have connection data and allow systems administrator to find infected clients via the NetFlow in their network. They are handled with some, as I mentioned, some custom-made scripts, which you can see here. It basically takes the data finds the appropriate abuse contact for the autonomous system an IP address is located in. We do this on an AS-based scale rather than IP-based scale because that's the only way we can somewhat reliably track who's the appropriate abuse contact for an address, because for each and every IP that would on one hand kill us with the amount of work we have to put in it, and we would risk a lot of false positives. As you can see on the downside, that's the not automated part. We have to review, hey, is the abuse contact somewhat good looking? Are the attachments somewhat good looking? If yes, we can send it, we can change the request, or if we want to fix it later, we can just skip that specific incident. Yeah, and that gets worked in the bulk, and after everything is finished and we hit send, then the email gets sent out from, again, our ticketing system. The domain-based tools, the domain-based incidents are handled with a custom-made graphical tool, which Christian Weiner actually wrote, and therefore he's going to tell you more about it.
Okay, so everyone can hear me? Fine. So hello again from my side. So I'm going to continue on the eye candy stuff. So we're now dealing with domain-based or URL-based problems in the internet. So we can sum this up with web servers. And for that reason, we needed to have a GUI tool, which is called web use. It's an artificial word of web and abuse. So why did we need a GUI tool for web servers and problems with web servers? It's easy to explain because most of the time you have something visual on it. Well, that's the usual case for web pages, but actually also for defacements, phishings, and stuff. So what we are able to do in terms of this tool is taking website screenshots. So if we visit a website, we can take screenshots. Actually, we take 2 of them. Why? That I'm going to talk about later. Then the tool has already built in text templates for all the categories we are dealing with. So these are in fact defacements. So I guess everyone of you knows what a defacement is. Phishings, same here. Fake pharmacy hacks is actually something, a topic we started to deal with 5 years ago. It's actually Google conditional hacks. So for the guys who don't know, Google conditional hacks is actually if you visit a website, you get the usual content from the website, but if you get there as a Google referrer or a specific agent, then you get another content delivered, usually for Viagra or Cialis. So this stuff we call fake pharmacy hacks. Next thing we have are search engine ranking hacks. It's usually stuff paired with OEM software, cheap software and stuff. Then we have exploit packs. These are actually hacked websites, and most of the time also malware spreading websites. And we also deal with cross-site scripting vulnerabilities, which is now all of the list of the categories we deal with. In terms of web use, we have the capability of analyzing stuff within the tool. So we have analysis tools like HTML viewers or simple WHOIS requests. We can do a monitored visit. So if you have a phishing site, we could decide to throw it also into our sandbox to check out if this if this is only a phishing site or if there's something more going on this site, a little present for Christmas or something like this. We have a PCAP viewer based on HTTP, so we could actually take a look into the monitored visit and the monitored PCAP. We could do JavaScript deobfuscation. We often see obfuscated JavaScript in such exploited websites. So we needed a tool or a functionality to easily deobfuscate such JavaScript code. We could also take advantage of our passive DNS database. And after all, we could do, or the handler could do, annotations on the screenshots to explain it to the guy who is reading afterwards the email. So this is actually what it looks like when the handler uses WebViews. And on the left side, you can see, or you cannot see because it's blurred out, but usually on the left side, you have the incident reports. So on a Monday, for example, Monday morning, we could have 100 to 150 incidents on web servers. On a daily basis, on a Tuesday, Wednesday, we have around 40, 50, something like this. So, but as you can see, we have two screenshots here. I already mentioned it before. Why do we need two screenshots? Because when we receive an incident report, it might be late at evening or within the night, and as soon as we get those incident reports, we go there and take the first screenshot, so the initial screenshot, and we also take a screenshot, or the WebViews tool takes a screenshot when the handler opens WebViews to deal with the ticket, just to know if the website that was hacked is still hacked, or still defaced, or still phishing there, because it's also possible that the administrator there already acted in terms of removing the defacement or the phishing. So, yeah, the first thing I have to talk about WebViews is everything in WebViews is keyboard controlled. Why? Because it's an efficiency aspect. We didn't want to have to use the mouse to act or to browse through all those incidents. It should be very efficient to keep the pace low in terms of deals or handled tickets within a minute. So this is actually every use case or every activity that can be done with WebViews, and we're going to take a closer look at it. So these are the basic use cases in WebViews. What can we do with a ticket? Well, if it turns out that the incident report is, or let's put it that way, that the administrator already removed the defacement or the phishing, then we actually have nothing to do with it. So there's no need to throw out an email for this kind of situation. We have another situation. We found a false positive. What's a false positive in terms of this? For example, we look for, we do Google hacking, and we look for stuff like defaced by or hacked by, which brings you those sites which are defaced. But sometimes you're dealing, or you have to deal with some blog entry where someone tells about this site has been hacked, or this statute has been defaced by someone, etc. And this is actually a false positive. So again, something we don't have to deal with. So we mark it as a false positive, and the incident is handled. Now I'm coming to the create use case. that happens when we found out, yes, this is actually an incident we have to deal with. And when we press C for create, there opens up a form which actually has all the emails which are available through whois data requests based on the registrant, tag C, the admin C, or the AS behind it, or even the national CERT, which is responsible for this web server or for this IP address. So next thing WebViews does, it tries to figure out which are the most relevant ones of those email addresses. We have some algorithms there. I don't want to go into the details in it because it takes at least half an hour, and I want to continue now. But actually, we have a smart algorithm behind it, so that's the handler usually don't really need to figure out which is the most fitting email address. So most of the time, or it should be most of the time, the pre-selected email addresses should fit perfectly. So the next thing we can do is the action take only. What does it mean? In a situation where we have really a lot of incidents, it might make sense to split up the workload between all of our handlers, and that they don't get across with those incidents being handled. You can decide to take only. So this is now your user is bound to this incident, and only you can handle those incidents later on, for example. So the other incident handlers won't see it anymore. Yeah, and the most easiest one is, yeah, I've done something wrong. It's not a false positive. It's definitely an incident. I have to create it, but I already tagged it as a false positive. Then I hit delete, and I reset the state for it. So the second group of activities is to go into the details of the ticket. What can we do here? We can zoom or unzoom the screens on the screenshots on the right side. So sometimes we need to take a closer look to the screenshots, then we can zoom this. We can also view the details, which are actually the details of the ticket system. So for example, if we want to take a look at the incident report, just press I, and you'll see the whole incident report out of the ticket system. We can take a look at the whois data for the actual web server and IP address. We could edit the text of the text template, which is going out afterwards when we commit the incident. So as I already mentioned, every category we're dealing with, we have a template for it, but we still can edit the template for specific reasons. So we can also change the constituency. What do I mean with constituency? In the beginning, I told you that we're a national CERT and also government CERT. So some of the servers we're dealing with, or some of the incidents we're dealing with, are definitely bound to government constituency, and that's when we change the constituency to government. We could also change the type. So something that turned out, something that was a phishing turned out to be also a malware spreading website, then we would elevate the category to an exploit bag. And we can also link existing reports. As you can imagine, when we get incident reports, sometimes it happens that we get more than one for one website or one web server. Then it makes sense to merge them up into one ticket. This is actually what I mean with link existing reports. Okay, so maybe the more interesting stuff comes up now. We can view the HTML behind the web pages we fetched from the web server. We have a second one, so a second variant to view the HTML. Is actually the difference between those two is that the second one goes there with a Google referrer. This is focused on what I already mentioned, Google conditional hacks. Then we have a fallback version, and we can open the website in an internal browser of this tool, which I don't really would do on a Windows client. So we can also take a look at the passive DNS data, and we can throw the actual tickets into the sandbox, or not the tickets, the web server behind it, into a sandbox to do more detailed stuff or analysis stuff, or it was already, or it came already from the sandbox, so it's actually an exploit pack. We can take a closer look at the analysis stuff from the sandbox. That's what we are doing now. So this is our sandbox. It's called Minibiz. It's a homegrown software. You can also download it from our website, but it's not the current version we are using in production. But I think in the next few months we're going to update the version which is publicly available. So what you can see here is we have some alerts, we have some warnings and informational stuff. The most relevant stuff here are the alerts and the warnings, because if a website turns out to trigger some alerts or warnings, it gets automatically generated as an email, which is afterwards a usual incident report in our ticket system. So as we can see here, we have some alerts. Actually, I can't read it, but it's not necessary at the moment. We have a few more possibilities to act with this, to act on this incident. So I'm going to the first one. This is a screenshot of the website visit. So it's actually the last second of the monitored visit through the sandbox. And what we can see here, you see the Java icon. So it's common case that if we have an exploited website, that Java is in some way part of this scenario. So this is what happens when we monitor or when we do a monitored visit of a website. We use in an automatical way, we use sysinternals process monitor and WinDump. So we monitor the whole system activities and use the first stage of our tool called procdot to generate a graph to find out what are the details of this infection or the drive-by. For example, in this situation, on the left side, you see this black rectangle, which is actually the Internet Explorer. The blue circles are standing for web server, but the most relevant stuff is on the right side, because those pink thick lines or edges between those other nodes mean thread injections in already existing processes. So nothing what you would expect from a visit on a normal website. Yeah, this is the PCAP viewer or HTTP viewer. So any request and response that goes out or comes in is bound together, so to a pair, request and response. And then you can take a look what's the data or the payload behind it. So as we can see, there are already some specific strings highlighted like evil. So we have an evil statement, JavaScript evil statement in the content of the response, or an iframe, for example, document write, and so on. So if we go further into one of these request-response pairs, then we can take a look at the content. And often it turned out that we have to deal with some obfuscated JavaScript, for example, in this case. So this is the obfuscated JavaScript part. Now we have the possibility to beautify the content we received, so especially the JavaScript content. So this is now much more readable, but it's not perfect at this time. So we still have the problem code here. We have to deobfuscate, and therefore we have implemented some automatic deobfuscation techniques, which we have two kinds of. The first one is the safe one. It actually hooks stuff like eval or document write and logs the parameters which are going into those eval statements, but doesn't execute them. And the second version does actually execute the parameters or the code. Why is it necessary? If you have to deal with obfuscated JavaScript, which obfuscates through multiple stages, and you need to execute the actual code. So, and as you can see here, it's the line number 1388, and this is actually when the whole deobfuscated JavaScript turned out of the deobfuscation algorithm. So this is now the code we figured out, and we can still beautify it with our beautification engine, and that's actually the code which was hidden in the obfuscation. So to go back to web use, we're now dealing with the explanation stuff. We can toggle if a screenshot shall be sent with the email which is going out afterwards or not. We can also put our own screenshots in it or change the screenshots. And we can even edit the screenshot which is going out with the email with annotations. Why do we do this? Because we try to explain it the best we can, what has actually happened on this website or what is the problem on this website. So as you can see on this slide, we have a location forward, which is actually the reason why the forward happens to another website. Yeah. When all these steps are done, we have all the tickets on the left side in green, yellow, or red, depending on, yes, we want to create a ticket, or it's not a ticket, it's a false positive, or it's nothing to do, stuff like this. So afterwards, when we're done with this, nothing happens until this time within the ticket system. It needs a click on the commit all button, then every of this or any of these tickets gets committed, and the emails get sent out through the ticket system. About the complexity of our incident handling stuff in terms of visual problems. So XSS vulnerabilities, phishing, defacements, fake pharmacy hacks, and search engine ranking hacks are quite easy to deal with. So especially with defacement, we have a pace of about two defacements, sometimes 3 defacements per minute to deal with. It depends on the defacement, how easy it's to detect that it's really defacements. We have some artificial or art sites out there which seem to be defaced but are only an arts site. But the exploit packs are by far the most complicated incidents to deal with, because you have to dive deeply into the details of the analyzed stuff and do some more information for the one who's getting the email afterwards, so that he can or she can act about the problem. So let's give a guess about the time or the effort for one exploit pack. It's about 5 to sometimes 20 minutes. So, and after all, we're done now with incident handling. And now I want to play a little game with you. So how many guys do you think we need to take care of our daily work or business? How many guys? Any guesses? 12. Pardon? Okay, any more guesses? So, actually, we only need 2. So one is doing the tag watch stuff, and the second one is dealing with the incident handling. So as I already mentioned, everything we do or every tool we create is focused on efficiency. And this is actually possible to handle those tickets and those tag watch stuff with 2 people in this way. So this is the last slide of our talk. Now I'm open, or we are open for Q&A. So thanks for your attention.
It's okay, questions? There's one.
Alex.
Got a couple questions. So on the web abuse tool, I wasn't clear. So there's the one screenshot that's just whenever the incident was made, and then there's one which is sort of like, here's what the website looks like right now, correct? That's what the bottom one was?
Mm-hmm.
And so how is that one collected in a way that doesn't, when you're dealing with exploit packs and stuff like that, why is that safe for you to go out right now and go render the website again, and why are you not going to get compromised?
So if I get it correctly, how do we create the screenshots without getting infected?
Yeah, especially the
Okay.
second one, the live one, like right now.
Yeah,
what's it
yeah.
look like?
So the web shot or the web screenshot tool we use is also homegrown. It's actually a virtual machine which gets the URLs in, goes visit the website, and throws out the pictures or the images of the screenshots, and gets reverted afterwards.
Sure. All right, and then on the client plus slide where there was like the pictures of different IP address ranges, and am I understanding that correctly, that the basic point was you collect information about here's known bad URLs, here's known bad domains, here's malware, and whatever control command and control it does, and then the point there is that are you notifying specifically Austrian companies that are affected according to the ASs and IP ranges, or are you just sending that to whoever is affected?
We are not collecting known bad guys. We are rather collecting information out of sinkholes, for example. So a researcher contacts us, hey, I've got this sinkhole, there are these Austrian addresses connecting to my sinkhole. You might want to inform them that some of their clients are affected with malware XYZ. We are not solely focusing on Austria, but we try to don't bother anyone with unnecessary email. For example, if we have a bigger number of infected clients that have falsely been aligned to an Austrian autonomous system and are located in reality, for example, in Germany, then we are talking to German BSE. If they're in Holland, we're talking to the NCAC. So we're trying to cooperate with other search as much as possible.
You said you don't have known bad, but you showed in your data feeds that you were getting stuff from like Microsoft stuff coming in and that. So you're saying only sinkholes from researchers as opposed to
Sorry,
that?
I might have misexplained it. We are not solely collecting sinkhole. It's a mixture of really everything.
Let's see, had something else. Oh yeah, so this is a thing that I argue with our CERT about, like just cert.org. So you said that one of your criteria for issuing warnings is you don't issue warnings for things where there's already updates available. And I sort of get that from the perspective of you don't want to be going out and sort of duplicating bug track and just saying like, look, here's every possible vulnerability out there, or you don't want to just reiterate vendors' vulnerability advisories where they're saying, look, there was a bug and now we fixed it. You don't want to just be duplicating that. But I mean, for instance, if I tell you, hey, there was a vulnerability in Dell BIOSes and they fixed it now and now you can go tell people about it, right? You're saying, well, that's probably not interesting. So then how do people ever find out about that, right? If you never issue warnings for things where, okay, there was an exploitable bug, and P.S. there is a fix for it now.
We are not approaching the problem in a fixed way. We're not saying if not all of these criteria are met, then it's not a warning, not worth a warning. Let's take the S-channel bug in Microsoft's crypto implementation as an example. This was unveiled with a patch day. And we looked at the vulnerability and said, yes, that's really, really critical stuff. And we wrote a warning about it. So it's more of an internal guideline. It's very hard to describe our warning finding process, if you want to call it that, in a few short words.
Okay, final question. How many warnings have you issued for BIOS vulnerabilities? Do you know, any sense?
Just out of my head, I don't know of any warning, and no blog post we wrote about it, but we don't, as far as I know, I don't do this job for very long, we haven't issued any warnings about BIOS vulnerabilities so far.
Okay, well, if you ever do, send me the email. That'd be nice to see. Okay, the Austrians at least are telling people about it now. Thanks.
Further questions? Yeah, how are you dealing with non-visible to the customer exploits, say something for search engine optimization or things like that, where the customer doesn't see that they are compromised? Do they heed your warnings in that case?
If it tastes fine. No, when we have non-visible content such as exploit bags or fake pharmacy hacks, we try to find the source. We find the location in the source, where is it located, and mark it out properly, and show them at the same time the exact location of that file on that server. So we try to make it very easy for them.
But they still may ignore that. What's your experience?
I'm trying to be diplomatic here. We have a very varying response. So, for example, we have parts of our constituency who definitely automatically most of our mails, and at the same time we have companies who take it very seriously and report back to us about each and every finding.
Yeah, it's the usually patch statistics, okay.
But
Any further questions? Okay, sorry.
Regarding your questions, that's actually the reason we have those annotation stuff on it.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe further time. We now have a coffee break.